Hey everyone, what is going on? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Brian. Today, what is it? It's another exciting video. This one I really think it is. I think a lot of people will be interested. We are talking today about the new Russell's 15-year release. We saw several releases of the Russell's 13-year. We're going to compare it to the Russell's 13-year. And then we saw this Russell's 15. This also comes at a time where we've seen a lot of limited and increased pricing products coming from the Wild Turkey camp. This Russell's 15 is coming out at a $250 price point, which is a big change from the $70 that the 13-year first came out. This is batch one. So when I was getting Russell's 13s, that's what I was paying for it. Now it's getting closer to this like $190, $180, whatever it is near you price point. And some of these other LEs are a little bit more expensive. So let's go ahead and let's pull back a little bit. The Russell's 15, I believe, is made up of 15 and 16-year-old barrels. This is coming in at 117.2 proof. Let's go ahead and dive into this guy. While we're at it, let's pop the 13 so we can go ahead and do a comparison back and forth too. And I'll talk about some other bottles as we go as well, but I really want to dive into this one. While you hear these glasses open up, jump down below, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Let me know your favorite Wild Turkey product that you all have tried. My gosh, wow. This nose is a thing of beauty. Really dense, incredibly creamy. I feel like you get like a grape soda-like note that you might get on other turkey products. You get this candied antique oak note. It's a little bit of coffee bean in there. There's raspberries, kind of powdered sugar. There's these worn leather notes, and I normally wouldn't say to somebody like to do a deep inhale. I feel like it kind of burns, you get a little bit more of the alcohol, but this one, if you do a nice kind of breathe in on the glass, you get a lot of really deep, really heavy notes that are really enjoyable. Some like kind of toasted brown sugar, this kind of damp, really nice, slightly earthy oak note in there with these really saturated fruit notes. And what I'm glad about this versus some other products of turkey that I've had is that sometimes that pushes into like these overripe fruit notes. Sometimes it pushes into these medicinal type fruit notes, but not on the nose here. These are just these deep fruit-soaked oak notes that are just right. Let's go to the nose real quick on the Russell's 13 by comparison. I was one who really enjoyed the Russell's 13. Again, this particular one's batch one. But compared to the Russell's 15, I could see why there were people who did not really care for the Russell's 13 or think that it was all that much better than a good Russell's pick, because by comparison, it's a little bit flatter. There's a little bit more just kind of caramel vanillas in the simple bourbon form that you notice here on the nose. Now, this one has been open for longer than this sample here, but just sugary, sweet pocket, caramel, vanilla, toffee even. It's got some kind of softer fruit notes, some kind of softer placed oak notes. The 15 is just ramped up, bigger. Now, they're not all that different in what you get. I think that they're really, you can tell they're the same like family of products, but the 15 is just older, more mature, more put together. I'm ready to dive into the palate. Let's go. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. The palate here is really layered. A big punch of oak up front. It's more of that old rick house oak. It's not just wood for the sake of wood. It's this kind of mossy, earthy rick house smell, that kind of getting it all pulled in. There's really well done spices here. I feel like they complement the oak right away. They start to taper across the palate. So you get the spiciness and it continues, but it sort of kind of slows down and allows this fruit to kind of come forward. There's a tiny bit of citrus nipping. There's a tiny bit of like this clove spice nipping alongside of these fruit notes. Good fruit here on the palate, but again, in a perk for me is that it's not too overdone. Again, I've hit some of these bottles that come off these really overripe fruit notes. They're a little souring, what I would call like wine-soaked fruits or something like that. It's definitely a turkey note specifically, but I've noticed in other things, these are a little bit more brighter. Again, I get more raspberry than I get cherry. Cherries, I feel like I would note that I pull out in a lot of different distilleries, Wild Turkey even specifically, but here it's a little bit more raspberry, a little bit more plum, not quite a lot of dried fruits, but maybe like some raspberry and plum. There's a creamy sweetness that's over everything, but even that is balanced with these pops of herbal notes that, again, sometimes can come off in a medicinal way. So like you find in other turkey products, but it's not overdone. It's just right. I think that's kind of the thing I'm summing up so far about all the notes. They're just right. Even as I sniff it more as I'm tasting, you get these nice kind of well-charred oak notes just continuing to come out. These really, really rich, sugary notes come out on the nose. It just keeps growing more dense, more inviting on the nose the longer you sit with it. Let's jump over to the palate of the 13. The palate of the 13, like the nose of the 13, does lead with, while there's fruit and oak, more caramel and vanilla pocket of things. What it does have, and how I like to describe it in some other products I've had, is more maybe of an antique-like oak note. It's a little bit more like what I would say lazy, easy. I've said the same thing about the 2019 Four Roses. I've said the same thing about the 135th. I've probably said the same thing recently about the 13-year-old Fitzgerald. These kind of more antique-y, not dusty in terms of dusty turkey notes, but they are maybe a more dusty character. This antique, slightly perfumed, slightly fragrant oak note that usually comes into easier to drink. I like the easier to drink side of it, but I can see why some people would also think the notes are simple. There's a bit more chocolate on the profile of the 13 that I'm noticing, to complement with those vanilla and caramels that are just notes I feel like are maybe more run-of-the-mill bourbon flavor notes in the 13, while I really still enjoy its softness, its elegance, and that antique quality. Going back to the 15, it's just a treat. It could be the factor of newness, but I feel like it's what I liked about the 13, but more. Not an overabundance of more, but more. The oak is mustier, the fruit pops a little bit more, and again, I say that because maybe I just care for that raspberry note a little bit more. Not a huge emphasis on vanilla and caramel. They're in here, but everything is nuanced, everything is pretty woven together really well, so I feel like it's a funky vanilla, it's a funky caramel, it's like all tied together and harder to pull apart. So for that reason, I feel like it's got a bigger flavor, it's layered, but maybe doesn't have like a ton of complexity like I've noticed in other things. And when I say complexity, it's more a term that I guess more specifically applies to me because I know I'm talking about compared to other things I'm talking about. But in terms of more identifiable notes, and in this case, maybe it's a benefit because complexity doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to like all the flavor notes. So this is where I'm going to talk about maybe some other products. Here, I feel like there's other turkey products out there, and with them, there might always be, while there's really good flavor to them, something you might be sacrificing. In the case of the Russell's 13, I feel like in some cases for people, it's more simple notes. And in my case, it has a little bit of a chocolatey note that I kind of wish wasn't there. In other times coming to this bottle, it's been a little bit more of the medicinal fruit note that I wish was tamed back a little bit. The bottle that I wish I had here to compare to, but I don't, is Generations. Because I remember really enjoying Generations. It's kind of maybe this viscous kind of profile that I think about when I taste this, but Generations, I believe, was a 9 to 15-year blend and maybe had more complexity, but I think with that maybe came some other notes that I don't either notice in here or maybe aren't necessarily better, like a more pronounced chocolate note. For some people may enjoy that. For me, I feel like I just like the cleaner profile that's here. I feel like maybe you notice more honey notes in the Generations. It makes sense. I feel like that's a flavor that comes with the younger, like maybe 9, 10-year products a little bit more. Same with like some nice sugary vanilla notes. I feel like the clean sugary vanilla notes, usually a sign of aged barrel. These 8 to 10-year barrels, maybe a little bit more of that flavor. Here, in this bottle, the focus is on time. The focus is on age. And I feel like you're getting a profile that's snapshotting in on this 15, 16-year-old product. But even if I think back to the Russell's 03, which was a lower proof 16-year product, it even had a lot of things that this has, but the fruit was a little bit more of the overripe fruit note. This is just right. It pushes as close as it can get without being overripe. It pushes as close as it can get to the medicinal type notes in terms of intensity, but it doesn't get medicinal. The one thing, because of like that big fruitiness that it reminds me of a little bit, is the last year's single Rickhouse. I really enjoyed the single Rickhouse last year, but in my mind, I think maybe that was even a little bit cleaner. I thought that was a profile that I think I called that like a Buffalo Trace type profile. So that's not really what I'm getting here. This is still very turkey in its vibes. It's very musty, it's very old and very fruity. If anything, it might remind me most closely of the older runs of these Four Roses OESVs, like the last video I talked about the Father's Day release, because it has these powdered sugary raspberry-like notes. And that to me is something I find a lot in the Four Roses. That type of sweetness I find a lot here in this glass. And I personally really like it because it's a profile I like, but that's just the closest thing I can think of right now. And there's a lot of similarities to that. Although I think the Roses, because I did taste that, is probably a little bit behind that. There's a little bit more spice, a little bit more chocolate. This is just nice oak and fruit. I also tried the William Heavenhill 17-year, but I think that William Heavenhill 17-year is like, it's Heaven Hill, and it's what I would call a very clean profile, a very refined, maybe a little too much so, and this has a lot more character, a lot more Rickhouse vibes. Now, why did I even bring up the William Heavenhill comparison? Well, in my mind, too, some people don't necessarily know why they would jump from one product to another. So Elijah Craig barrel proof, high age products go up to the William Heavenhill. A lot of people will say that Elijah Craig barrel proof is cheaper, it's easier to find, and it's 90 to 95% of what you'll get out of the William Heavenhill. That's true. But I think that there are things that the William Heavenhill shapes, it takes away from the Elijah Craig barrel proof, a little bit more refined. I think that's what you get in this Russell's 15 compared to even the Russell's 13 and some other things. I think that it doesn't show things that I would say are any negatives at all. It just highlights good qualities. It's really well done. It keeps your attention the whole time. Another comparison that might not resonate to some people here, but in terms of people saying like, hey, I'm trying to figure out in the terms of turkey, like, do I want to buy this? It also is a really interesting similarity between, let's say, like the Coy Hill single barrels to small batch. Doesn't taste like Coy Hill, but the single barrels had a lot of flavor that the small batches had. People just said the small batch has a little more, and I think that's what I'm running into with this Russell's 15. Has a lot of similarities to other turkey products that I enjoy. It's more, it's dialed in, it's a specific type of snapshot of flavor profile. I think that highlights age and time in this 15, 16-year-old pocket in a very Rickhouse funk, highlights on fruitiness sort of way. This probably wasn't the shorter video that I really hoped that it was, but I hope it was still informational to you all. I'm an enormous fan of this Russell's 15. It hits the flavor pocket that I'm looking for. I think that it immediately jumps into my short list so far, but it is only June, going into July, of allocated, hard-to-find bottles I've enjoyed. But in that list, too, are, again, the Four Roses Father's Day. It's the Old Fitz 13. There's a couple other things, too, but very, very big flavors. It's probably one of my favorite releases I've had from this. Again, I wish I could compare it specifically to the Generations, but I can't do that today. I'm hoping that some other channels get a chance to really do that. But again, even the Generations was a $450 bottle. This is $200 cheaper. Now, if you're still saying in that, I want to know how it compares. If you're that type of person, then I think you're going to enjoy this anyway. I think you're going to be the kind of person that's going to want this anyway. But I do think if you already have the Russell's 13, there's not really a reason to say, oh, I'm missing out with the 15. But if you want more of what the 13 had to offer, you're going to get more amped up flavors to the 15. Just know the flavor pocket might not be all that different than what you're going to be experiencing in the 13. Guys, thanks for tuning in to another video. Hope it was insightful, informational. Let me know if you have other questions or other things down here in the comments below. I'd love to keep interacting with you all on Russell's 15, 13, other products, wild turkey, as we continue to go on. If you get a chance to pick one of these up and you try it, let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear what you all think about it as well. Thanks everybody for tuning in to another video. Hope it was insightful, informational, and until next time, we'll see you all later.